Peace and blessing. This is Derek Rocco Moore. And recently I got a question. It was from a fan, and the fan was basically asking, I'm trying to make sure I put this, word this correctly. I'm trying to remember exactly how they actually asked me this. So I'm going to try that. I might be paraphrasing or so. But basically the question was, how can you be free of sin if you've already sinned? How can you be free of sin if you've already sinned? And it was kind of based upon, when they asked this question, it has something to do with the 42 declarations of Maat, and or what people call the 42 Laws of Maat. And they were asking about this, and they were saying, if I remember correctly, they said, yeah, they're a little perplexed by that whole thing, because it's like, yeah, how can you be free of sin how can you be free of sin if you've already sinned? It does kind of sound like a little, like an oxymoron or so. But like I said, this is where you see the genius in indigenous spirituality. You see the genius in Kemetic spirituality. And before I go ahead and I answer that question, before I actually go into how you can actually be free of sin if you've already sinned, before I go into that, the first thing that has to be understood, the first thing that we got to go ahead and we have to talk about, is that you cannot approach any indigenous spirituality from a Western perspective, okay? And unfortunately, this is one of the things, I've been saying for the longest time. And unfortunately, a lot of people, they still don't get it. They still treat the 42 declarations of Maat like as if they're the 10 commandments. This is something that you're supposed to live by, okay? And that's not the case, okay? That's not the reason why they were written. You have to go ahead and you have to, when you embrace indigenous spirituality, and you embrace Kemetic spirituality, you have to, for the most part, you have to purge yourself of Western thinking, of Western thought, of Western concepts of God, Western concept of religion, spirituality, the whole deal. And the reason why is because, remember, most of your indigenous traditions, and this is including Kemetic spirituality, most of your indigenous religions and traditions, they are based upon, they're nature-based, okay? So they're all about doing things in balance. So a sin from the Kemetic perspective is not the same as a sin from a Jewish, Christian, or Islamic perspective, okay? So, giving an example of what I mean when I'm saying starkly different, your Western religions, they all began, for the most part, with this, this all-powerful God who, after creating the universe, decides to create the universe, decides, hey, let me go ahead and I'm going to create, all the living things on the planet and all that kind of stuff. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create human beings. But I'm going to create man, and then I'm going to create woman to basically go ahead and be the helpmate of man. And after creating Adam and Eve or whomever, okay, after doing all this, gives them commandments, gives them one law, one commandment: do not eat from this forbidden fruit, all right? And then somehow, for whatever reason, the man is influenced, because he's gullible like that. The man is influenced by his wife, hey, or by Eve or whomever. And He's influenced. Go ahead and eat this fruit. Next thing you know, boom, there it is. There's the original sin. The original sin stems from the fact that they ate fruit from a forbidden tree. They disobeyed God. Okay? Instead of it going ahead and looking at the fact that apparently your God is not all that perfect, okay? By logic, your God is not all that perfect if you went ahead and you created human beings and they went ahead and they rebelled against you. Or you created something else and it rebelled against you. You created angels and the angels rebelled against you. Apparently, yeah, I don't think you're all that perfect then. Okay? That doesn't sound like a perfect creator. But that's Western perspective. That's the Western religious way of doing things. And this is how they introduced the original sin. This is how they introduced sin. Okay? So you start off flawed only because of your curiosity, I guess, you know? I mean, of course, we can go a little bit deeper in that, but that's not what this channel is for, okay? Let them deal with them and let them deal with that and move on. But when you compare this to Kemetic spirituality, whereas we have a perfect creator and the perfect creator creates everything and everything, but before the perfect creator creates everything, okay? Before the creator creates anything, it causes to come into existence. You know, after it comes into existence, after it brings itself into existence, it causes to come into existence Ma'at. And Ma'at goes ahead and establishes balance and order throughout everything. It also gives everything that exists purpose. Okay? So when you understand it from that perspective, and you understand that everything that was created with that in mind, there really is no such thing as a sin. You understand that? Because by theory, okay, by Kemetic theory, if the creator was perfect and created everything in its likeness, everything else and everything that was created based upon the Ma'at and given purpose. Everything that exists in perfect harmony already and has been given purpose. So it is perfect because it is a reflection of the divine. Okay? So that's a completely different concept. That's a completely different way of looking at things in comparison to Western traditions and Western religions or so. So then, how does sin come about? How does, where does sin come from a Kemetic perspective? Well, if you go back and if you keep that in mind, what was said about Ma'at, when you go ahead and you take into account that, or you look at the legends, for instance, look at the Kemetic legends, especially like the Kemetic story of Osir or Osiris. If you look at that story, you see that the flaws that people have, or the flaws that the characters or the divinities or the Neteru have within the legend or within the lore, stems from them going ahead and doing things in excess or not enough of it. In other words, the sin comes from them going ahead and being imbalanced, from them doing isfet. Okay? For instance, Osir, which a lot of people don't want to go ahead and look at this, but Osir, for instance, or Osiris, loses his life because of his naivety. Him going ahead and thinking, hey, from one perspective, you can say, okay, well, his head was too high, it was too high up in the clouds for him to think and for him to believe that everybody just loved him everybody just, was happy about him and was happy for him and all this other kind of stuff. Okay. Everybody was just feeling this way. They was just all gleeful and elated about Osir, to the point that he forgot about his jealous youngest brother. Okay. So in one sense, if you look at it from that, as I call it, a shamanic perspective, you can see that Osir, basically, he was too spiritual. Haven't you been too spiritual before? Haven't you been? I know I've been too spiritual. Oh my gosh. I know I was too spiritual once upon a time, thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do some artwork and everybody's going to love it. I'm just going to make all kind of money and everything, and everybody's going to take care of this, and I'm going to live with the community. Yeah, I remember doing that. Okay. Head was up in the clouds, On the flip side, when you look at Set, why is Set considered, how does Set go ahead and sin? Well, Set sins by going ahead and being materialistic, by being egotistic, okay, or egotistical, And this is where that sin comes into play, all right? So sin from a Kemetic perspective versus sin from the, like I said, the European, the Western perspective, is two completely different things, all right? So when you're talking about, when you're talking about sin from the Kemetic perspective, we're talking about doing things in balance. And this is the reason why this is the reason why I try to encourage people, stop looking at the 42 laws of Ma'at or the 42 declarations as 10 commandments. Stop trying to live your life based upon concepts and precepts, or a list of, a list of declarations that was written thousands of years ago, that has, some of them are relatable, but a lot of them aren't, because you don't live in that time frame. The culture has changed. Ma'at has not changed, but the culture, the dynamics have changed. So you shouldn't be living your life based upon those declarations. You should be going ahead and trying to establish where is Ma'at in your life and establish a relationship with Ma'at. Okay? With Ma'at. All right? So the secret to going ahead and living, I'm still trying to remember how they put it, living, being purified or cleansed of sin if you've already sinned, or not being of sin if you've already sinned, okay? The secret of going ahead and doing that is understanding. In the spiritual realm, time and space don't exist. If you go ahead and you meditate, if you go ahead and you do a ritual or any of those things, ritual meditation, if you go into a trance state, time and space doesn't exist, okay? So the ingenious of going ahead and saying, well, I have not done this, refers back to this understanding that time and space does not exist in the spiritual realm. It only exists in the physical realm. So if you identify with your humanistic nature, then yes, of course you've sinned. Okay? But if you identify with your spirit, you identify with your spiritual self, your spiritual being, then no, you have not sinned. You have not committed any of these, adultery or any of these other things, any of these other violations. You have not done this. And if you say it enough times and you repeat it enough times, eventually it becomes true that you have not done this, and you've convinced yourself that you are purified of it. You have convinced yourself that you have not done any of these things, because in essence, in truth, in spirit, you have not. That's the secret of going ahead and living according to the 42 declarations of Maat. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, feel free to drop me a line. Until next time, peace.